Alright guys, so I've been meaning to make this video for quite a while now, but basically what I'm going to do is go over all of the features of the Triton router, more specifically the TRA-001, which is the one I have right here. But I think all of these same things do apply to the MOF-001, which is the medium range one, and most of them still do apply to the cheapest one, the JOF-001. So anyways, obviously in the box you get the router, as well as this stuff over here. So you get two separate chucks, one for 1/2 inch and one for 1/4 inch shaft bits. So these are locked together. Apparently on a previous revision of this router they weren't, but now the actual chuck stays in the collet, so it all comes out as one piece. You get this little crank handle, which basically you just turn it like that and it slots into something over here, but I'll show you that later when I'm actually going over the features. It's a height adjustment for the router. You've got this little wrench, which is to take out your chuck. And you actually only need one wrench because this has an interesting shaft lock feature, which I'll go over in a minute. And you get this extended base plate, which you mount your router onto, so it gives you more surface area to put on your workpiece so that it's less likely to tip off. And that also allows you to use this edge guide right here. So first I figure we'll go over the features of this actual router itself, so let me kind of move this stuff out of the way so I can get a more hands-on view of the router. Alright guys, so I figured we would just go top to bottom on this. So right here you can see that this is a 5-speed motor, so you can adjust the speed of your bits depending on how large in diameter they are. Right here you've got a cap that you can remove and take out a spring depending on whether you want to use this as a plunge router or if you want to mount it in a router table. As it says right on that sticker, basically it just says take this cap off and remove the spring if you're going to be mounting it in a router table. This is your fine adjustment knob, which when you turn it, it will raise and lower the router very slowly, so it's your fine adjustment. Next right here we've got the lock, so that when you get it to the proper height that you want it at, you just lock it and it won't go anymore. On this side you've got your knob, so in fixed mode you can rotate this and set your depth to where you want it, and this is the coarse adjustment, so you set it to about there, and then if you need to make a fine adjustment you would mess with this one a little bit till you get it perfect. And this is also how you switch into plunge mode, so just kind of bring it all the way back up, push in on this button in the middle, and it becomes a plunge router. So back over here you have your power switch. Now this is originally covered with this little plastic shield that goes inside here. So basically it's like spring loaded, and when the router's off you actually have to push this because it's spring loaded in order to push that on. And when it's on you cannot plunge the router all the way to the bottom. So I decided to disable this because I'm going to be putting this in a router table and that's inconvenient. But for handheld it's actually a really important safety feature. So at this point I would never use this router handheld anymore unless I put that back in there, because this button is so big that once you take the cover off it's really dangerous. So basically at this point I'm only using this for table use. So moving down further we have our depth stops. So basically how you use these, which is actually the reason I'm making this video, because somebody requested to see that. You set this to this black bar right here, which has markings on it. We'll see if I can zoom in on those. They have depth markings on there, so you put that one on there, and you'd have a bit in your router of course, and let's say you plunge it down to there until it touches your workpiece. So if at that point the router bit is touching the workpiece, we would tighten this knob right here, and you can lift it back up and you see there's a gap here. Now if you're plunging, for example, once again I'm going to zoom in on the gauge here, then you turn these little knobs and they just thread up and down. So say I wanted to plunge down to 1/2 inch, I would just screw this down until I get to 1/2 inch. I'm not going to do it precise because I'm at a weird angle, but let's say that's 1/2 inch. And then I would rotate that to underneath the column, or underneath the little tube here, and then once you push down, it'll go 1/2 inch until it hits that ring, as you can see back here. So then you're plunging effectively 1/2 inch into the board. I wish I had router bits to show you this, but I currently don't have any. So you'll just have to kind of use this example, and I hope it works well enough. Pretty much the last thing about the actual router itself is you've got these plastic shrouds on both sides, and right here is a dust port. So you can hook a hose directly into here, and it's got pretty good dust collection from what I've heard. Again, I haven't actually gotten to use this router yet, which is kind of unfortunate. But eventually I'll use it and I'll be able to either confirm or deny that. But apparently these dust ports work really well. Alright guys, so the first piece that I wanted to demonstrate was this base plate right here. So as you can see, I have actually flipped the router upside down. So basically, let's take a look at the prep work I did. All I actually did was loosen these screws right here so that they pop above the surface of this little black piece. So these just thread on and off pretty simply, and then they're spring loaded, so you just push up on them and they go up. So I'm sure you can figure out how to do that. And then basically I'm just going to take this plate. It's got these two little notches so it'll stop itself, and we just want to line that up right there and then poke it through and slide it over and kind of lock it down, and do the same on the other side and tighten them both back up. Get them pretty snug. You don't have to feel like you're going to break the thing or anything, but just nice and tight, and flip it back over. And what that is good for is if I wanted to route the edge of this and I had a round over bit or whatever, and let's just say I plunge it down, okay, and I'm gonna round over the edge. This router is pretty heavy, and since the router bit's exactly in the middle of the router, you could have some wobbliness. But with this extra plate over here, you can kind of put your hand on there, although for safety reasons I can't recommend you to do that, because if you cut your finger off somehow, it would be my fault or whatever. But I honestly don't see that much danger in it. But you could hold that down, or you could just use it as pressure to kind of push towards the table a little bit more without worrying about having it tip up or anything. And then you could just route the edge of this much easier. Another feature that brings is this little plate right down here. So what you do is you take this wing nut off, washer off, and lift this up. And what this can do is help you make circles. So what you would do is mark the center of where you want to make a circle. So let's just say I wanted to do it right there. And I would put a nail through either of these holes depending on what size of nail I had, and just nail it into my workpiece. And so of course it'd be secured on there. And then basically just bring the router back over, and you would align that again and put the washer and wing nut back on here. And so let's just say that I had nailed that into the desk up here, and what that would allow me to do is, or I could scoot this over more, so if I wanted to cut a smaller circle or a larger circle as well. And so let's just say I wanted to cut a small circle and I put it there, and it would rotate around that center pin. And I'm not going to do that all the way because I'll just ruin the surface of this desk. But it would rotate around with like a plunge bit, of course, and you could cut a circle out. So since there are no real aftermarket circle jigs that I know of for Triton brand routers, that's a nice feature. But if you're still looking to use this like exclusively to cut circles, like if you make subwoofer boxes, for example, you might want to consider a Porter Cable brand or something, because those have more circle jigs available. But this one should do just fine if you're only occasionally cutting circles. So the next piece that attaches onto this would be your edge guide. So basically how this works is you've got these two little wings, and you just loosen them both up. And let me scoot this back. You would set this at the edge and slide both of these onto these runners here, because these black pieces have notches cut out, as you can see right there. So you'd slide those notches onto the rails at the side and just kind of even it up. And you can set how far in you want this to be. So this would be an edge guide. So if you wanted to cut a slot 2 inches from the edge, you would just have to make sure you line your router bit up 2 inches from the edge. Tighten both of these little wing nuts underneath, and then you can use this to slide along, and with your plunge bit you could plunge it down and cut like a rabbet right wherever you set it to be. So in this case, I don't know how far that would be, but you just run it along all the way and you'd have your slot cut for whatever you needed it for, which is a nice little feature to have. So that actually covers all of the features for this router when using it handheld. So now it's time to move on to what you can do with this when you are using it in a router table. So first of all, what you need to do is remove this spring, and a few precautions for that because I've done this a couple times. You want to have the router raised all the way up to the maximum height, so in other words you don't want to have that spring compressed. Bring it up to the maximum height and put this lock down so that when the spring pressure is lost, it doesn't just fall. So lock that down, and then what you can do is take a Phillips head screwdriver, take out that screw, which I'm going to do now, and it actually doesn't have to come completely out, just far enough to clear the black cap here. That should be far enough. And what you're going to want to do is rotate that way, counterclockwise, and it's going to be under pressure because it's enough to lift that whole router up. So just be ready for it to kind of spring, and just bring it up nice and slow. Pull your spring out and keep it in a safe place in case you ever want to use this as a handheld router again. Or if you had to send it in for warranty purposes, you might need this, so just keep it handy. Now I'm going to set that off to the side, and of course tighten the screw back up so that you don't lose the cap or anything like that, or have to worry about it coming off. And at that point, I'm going to take this lock off, and as you can see, the router no longer supports itself and it will just fall all the way down. Now that might seem bad, but of course now we're talking about using this in a router table, which actually means it's going to be suspended upside down. So basically, the router is quite heavy, so of course gravity is going to want to pull it down when it's mounted on a table, so you don't want a spring helping it push down even further. Also, there would actually be no point in having this be in plunge mode when you use it on a table, so push this back in again so it's in ratchet mode. And there you go. So now you'd have it upside down in your table. Now is where this fancy knob comes in. So I'm going to try to do this as best as I can. I'm in a small room. But basically, there's this little notch right over here, which corresponds with that end there. And so when you have this router on a table, you can kind of put this on here and just line it up with that, and you spin, and this corresponds with that fine adjustment knob. So what you can do, and I'm going to try to set this up better, is you can adjust this and it will raise and lower your router. So you could modify this handle to work with a drill as well if you wanted to. You'd basically have to cut the end off and hook it up to a drill. But as you can see, I'm bringing the router down now. And one of the features that I forgot to mention for using this handheld, but it actually applies either way, is the bit lock. So if you leave that power switch cover in there, you'll have no worries about this. But in my case, if I somehow left the power on and I bring the router all the way down, it locks the shaft, which could be very bad because it'd be spinning and then it'd lock and it'd just probably like explode or something. But if you have that lock on there, you have no problem. Or if you take it out and you're careful, you should have no problem. But again, that's the asterisk there. If you do it, I'm not responsible. So that is one of the cool features. You can see right here, there's that button, which corresponds to a piece up here. And when it goes all the way down, it will lock this shaft. So, as I was saying earlier, you only need a single wrench to change out your bits. So, as you can see there, the shaft itself isn't spinning at all, and I could come in here with the wrench and just undo it, which is kind of a neat feature that not every router actually has, so that's quite nice. And I guess since I did remove the power switch, I should kind of cover what that actually requires. So once again, this is just kind of instructional only. Do this at your own risk if you really want. But if I even remember correctly, because it was a little while ago, you have to take out these 4 screws at the bottom. There's 2 right here and 2 on the back side, which will lift the orange part up. And then you have to take out these 4, or there's a 5th one hidden somewhere, or the one up here on the power cable, yeah. And then the side comes off, and then you kind of got to take some more screws out and kind of jumble around some wires a little bit. And you can take the spring and the clear plate, which this is what you can see from the outside of the router, and this is the rest of the piece inside. And there'll be a little spring, you don't want to lose that. So you just take these 2 pieces, throw them in a bag somewhere in case you ever need to put them back in. And at that point, you're good to go in table use. Now again, if you do that, I'm not responsible for any damage that you might do to your router. Also, it's not safe to use it handheld like that anymore, just because of the possibility of holding this handle right here and somehow bumping it on when you don't mean to. So only do that if you're going to use it in a table. And also, if you are going to do that and use it in a table, you can leave this on, of course, but you need a secondary power switch somewhere else on the table, and make sure that is off before you go to plunge it all the way and change bits. Because if you do leave that secondary switch on for whatever reason and the motor is spinning, then you're going to have horrible problems when that little lock slams down. So just keep those things in mind when you're using this, especially in a table, and you should be good to go. But anyways, guys, I think that's about it for this video. So if you enjoyed it, please be sure to click the like button, as that does help me out. Also, leave me a comment about anything that I did well at or anything that I could improve. And if you would like to see more of my videos, then please do click the subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys later.